the requirements of the IMF and the World Bank, of the WTO. And in fact, when Zuma takes over after Polokwane earlier, when there was a division within the ANC, he then went to Davos, the World Economic Forum, also met with Merrill Lynch and said, don't worry, the economic policies that Mbeki adopted, I'm going to continue those policies. So in fact, there'll be a continuity on the economic level, even while people are arguing that the corporations should not be given priority, that jobs and housing, people living in the shacks and in the shanties as they were under apartheid, still living under the same conditions.
Dennis Brutus, can you explain who Jacob Zuma is?
Yes, well, there'll be various descriptions, and I'll try to be as fair as I can be. As opposed to Thabo Mbeki, he was part of the armed struggle, spent time in prison for his opposition to apartheid. Mbeki was a student at the universities, both in Moscow and then in England, where I met him. I was then in exile myself. Zuma is seen much more as a populist kind of man in the street, easy to talk to. Politically, of course, a lot less academic. Mbeki cultivated the image of the rather aloof intellectual. Zuma is much closer to the people in that sense. And he has a song about "Bring Me My Machine Gun," which reminds people, of course, of the time when he was part of the armed struggle. Politically, I think, in my own view, a lot less politically sophisticated than Mbeki. But the idea has been that he's more a man of the people and therefore is likely to pay more attention to their needs. I'm not sure that's true. Even though he's being backed by the trade unions, COSATU, he's being backed by the South African Communist Party, so that the assumption is that he will be more left-leaning than Mbeki was, but actually there's not a whole lot of evidence for that, and the chances are that he will simply continue the kind of neoliberal policies, putting the corporations ahead of the people in terms of the resources of the country.
Criminal trial that Jacob Zuma underwent?
Right. I kind of avoided that because it is itself controversial. There's several elements. Of course, previously he was in charge with an alleged rape. It was a long, drawn-out trial about that, which ended with him being acquitted. Then came the much more complex issue of an enormous arms deal involving billions of South African rands, or for that matter, billions of dollars or English pounds. The German arms industry was involved, the British arms industry was involved, and most seriously, he was alleged to have solicited a bribe from the arms industry so that if there was any investigation, he would be there to protect them and to stall any investigation. Unfortunately, this is unproved. In fact, it's never actually got to any kind of conclusive level in court. What instead has happened is a whole series of legal actions on both sides, either by the government, prosecuting authority, or by Zuma's defense. And those have been essentially arguments about procedure, whether the correct process was followed or not. And the latest development there, of course, has been a judge in Pietermaritzburg who said that the procedure itself was flawed, and so that Zuma was succeeded at that level. But the judge at the same time pointed out, this is not a decision on guilt or innocence. That's a separate issue which have to be discussed. My attention is with the procedure, and I'm saying the procedure was flawed. Then he added a very significant footnote. He said, the process on this issue seems to me to have been subject to political meddling. And by implication, he was, of course, blaming Thabo Mbeki. Mbeki has denied it. But as a consequence of that, the ANC could say, we are going to ask for Mbeki's resignation on the basis that he appears to have meddled in this issue. I hope that covers some of the legal complexities. It's very hard to be fair on this issue, but I'm trying
Dennis
to
Brutus,
be fair.
we only have about 15 seconds, but Nelson Mandela's position on what has taken place.
On the whole, he's chosen to be very low profile. Of course, some of the economic decisions made by Mbeki were really inherited from Mandela, so he has to take some of the blame for the focus on priority for the corporations versus the people. At the moment, he has not had a great deal to say, but like Tutu has expressed regret.
Dennis Brutus, we're going to have to leave it there, but I thank you for being with us, South African poet and activist. And that does it for today's broadcast. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Berkshire, Producer Armante, Angela Comet, Steve Martinez, Nicole Salazar, Hane Massoud, Robbie Karen. I will be in Baltimore this weekend, 3:30 on Friday at Johns Hopkins, at night in Morgan State, and on Saturday at the Book Festival. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.